Hey friends, thank you so much for joining me. In this drawing lesson, we're gonna learn how to draw a jacket. So I have the main very lightly drawn guidelines, and I'm gonna go over them right now and make them, let me switch to a different, like a mechanical pencil. I'm gonna go over them and add some few details, and I wanna really draw the seams and all the important things, and then we can begin talking about the folds and everything that's created and how they behave with this type of material. So let me go ahead and do that in time lapse, and I'll be back soon. Okay, we've got all the major guidelines in. Now let's begin indicating where the folds are gonna come. Well, in this type of jacket, which is sort of this leather jacket, I'm personally vegan, so, you know, let's call it a synthetic leather jacket. So we'll have mostly the folds around the regular areas. Only the major difference here, there are two main differences. So the first difference is with the material itself. It tends to be very hard and tough to twist and bend in some types of leather slash synthetic leather. And so what we're gonna see is fewer, thicker folds, mostly, in most types of jackets like this. The second thing is actually the way in which we draw those folds. And this comes from the fact that this type of material is very shiny. And so we're gonna have strong contrasts between the darker parts and the brighter parts, meaning the darker parts are gonna be very dark, almost black, and the brighter parts are gonna be very shiny, white. And so these are the few main things we need to pay attention to here. As you can see, I'm indicating some very light folds, some very the common zigzag type of thing that we've seen in many sleeves. And these are gonna be the main folds here, but they are truly gonna pop as soon as we start giving this some shading. A lot of the times you'll also see folds moving across like this. It's gonna surprise you, but many times you're gonna see this. And this sort of break that we saw in earlier types of clothing items. So we'll have this kind of break. Let me fix that. Again, we'll have this break thing happening, and this break indicates that there is a fold nearby. So as you see, this type of line connects here with this break. Sometimes we'll see some very rough folds going like this. It really requires some reference, you know, for most of this type of things, especially when it comes to shiny surfaces, and you want to really get the shading done correctly and all the lighting effects done correctly. Another important thing to remember is that usually these types of jackets are thick, and so we'll have for the first part we're gonna have this thickness. We'll have to convey it in some sort of way, and second is this thickness will be conveyed also by drawing a lot of seam lines, because the thicker the cloth is, the more seam lines there are gonna be. Now here, if you remember, we're gonna change the contours so that they are congruent with the shapes of the folds here. So wherever I can imagine a fold bulging out, I'm gonna make it like this. And whenever there is a hole sort of thing, then I'll go inside and make a dent. And this is mostly it for the left part. Now we're gonna go over the right part here. Again, we'll see some folds sort of dropping from the shoulders. And in this hand, I want to do some cool shiny effects. So we'll have something like this here, this curve that I like to draw, and we'll have some very sort of long, slightly curved, slightly diagonal folds. And these are going to be really shiny. They're going to be, the contrast is going to be very strong on this side. It's going to be a lot of black and a lot of white. The area I'm indicating right now is actually the area that's going to be white. And it kind of indicates the zigzag shape of the folds, but we don't even have to draw the actual folds. I'm just indicating where I'm gonna keep it white. So this is also a way of doing this. And I don't think there is a step-by-step perfect way of doing this, so I'm actually showing you the methods by which I work so that you can employ them yourself. And what I'm going to do soon is go in time lapse and begin shading, and I'll leave some of the shading work for real time because this is a rather challenging clothing item, and so we're going to have a lot of it's going to end up being a very long video if I don't. So just before I do that, remember how we had the shirt tucked in and it was kind of bulging downwards? Here we can kind of have the same effect because it's not tucked in, but it's sort of held by this rubber band that you sometimes see in these types of clothes. And also on this side, this tends to happen. And so let me go ahead and do some of the shading in time lapse, and I'll be back really soon. Okay, let's talk a bit about what I've done here because I've done quite a lot. So I basically decided where light comes from. The general direction is from above and to the right, and I just went along with that direction and shaded everything in here. And I notice, as I said, I use very strong contrasts between the bright areas and the dark areas. Now it's maybe it doesn't look so much of a contrast to you, but the thing you have to understand here is that this is just the first layer of shading, and there's gonna be another one on top of it. I'm gonna make everything here a little darker, even more than that. And so I just wanted to talk a bit about notice here how the parts of the folds that are protruding outwards, I left very light, entirely white in most of the parts. And here as well, I just left this big white spot. And the parts that are darker, I began to fully darken them. I'll further darken them in a few minutes. So this is it for this side. Now what I'm gonna do is the very same thing on the right, and I'm gonna go over it and strengthen some of the pencil lines here. and then I'll be back to conclude. But the main thing I wanted you to see here is how the drawings, the shapes of the folds turns into the finished drawing here. So I wanted you to see the process of laying down the folds and then turning them into actual things that take up space, three-dimensional objects. Okay, so let's begin with the right part, and I'll be back soon. Okay, welcome back. I've done a lot in each of the time lapses in this video, I'm aware of that. And hopefully you still can get the main idea here, because this is really something that's hard to do real time, since there's just so much things to do here. This is a pretty big drawing, not physically big, but it entails a lot. So hopefully the message still came across. What I'm doing now is going over it again and applying a darker layer of tone to really get that strong contrast that characterizes leather jackets and synthetic leather in our case, right? And yeah, so I'm basically going over it. And another thing that you may have noticed that I've done, and I don't usually do, is I've went over the contours. Now I went over them with the mechanical pencil and created stronger lines. I usually don't do that, and I wanted you to really be able to see how the folds work here, especially in these areas, and it was kind of hard seeing without me doing it and going over these lines. So hopefully you will forgive me for blatantly drawing the lines. Usually when you try and draw realistic things, you try and avoid drawing actual contours, because you want to convey the shape of the objects you're drawing purely by giving them different tones or values or shades. You're drawing with shades essentially, and here I went out of my way to and kind of made something different, only so that you can see it better. So anyway, I'm gonna go over and add those finishing touches here, make everything darker, and I'll make it again in time-lapse, the third and last time-lapse for this video, and then we'll wrap things up. And that's it. Let me go ahead and I'll be back soon. Okay friends, welcome back. Yeah, this has been a really long video, and hopefully you get the gist of it. Shading is a topic in and of itself that is worthy of a separate course or a separate entire separate video. But the thing is that if you really want to recreate something like what I've done, you really need to get that reference. So the best way to practice this is to take challenging objects that have many different folds in them, and or maybe very different tones and colors and shades, and try and recreate them, draw them, and see what happens. This is really one of the most challenging things. A good place to start is, like, the classic example is to draw an apple or something similar, which has this shininess and a strong contrast as well. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned from it, and I'll see you again in the next lecture.